Is this not even a higher method than the law of fair exchange? We're saying what? Everything I own, this person owns. And then this person tells this person, and then everything this person owns, I own. What a way to have everything you want for nothing. All right, let's give you an illustration. I used to live in a town on a little lot, 70 by 130. On my lot, you couldn't horseback ride, you couldn't water ski, couldn't even go for a hike. In other words, there were limitations. No swimming. Well, not much you could really do. Now, I purchased a ranch with a 7-acre lake. Now, everybody who was in unity relationship with me, were they jealous? No, they suddenly were thrilled. Why? All the things they couldn't do on my lot, they could now do. So we said that they were thrilled over my success. If a man receives a promotion and nobody likes it, we say he's in contest, isn't he? If everybody loves it, he's in role relationship because they share in his success. And this is the way it works. In other words, under contest, nobody likes for me to actually advance. Why wouldn't you want somebody to advance if everything they're going to receive is yours anyway? So we say in role relationship, there is joy over success. And again, is that something for nothing? Now, does this take a long period of time? I would like to give you the actual illustration of King David. And I'd like to go back to the caves where he lived. Now, he lived in the caves because there was a king named Saul that would have killed him. It's a pretty good reason to live in the caves. Now, while he was in the caves, some men came out to see him. Some of these men were not the desirables of the land. Some were also running from the king for other reasons. And as they would come to actually see him, he would not know whether they were criminal or whether they were really noble or whether they were really going to give him allegiance or whether they would turn on him. So in order to solve his problem of selection, he turned to the one that he was submissive to and said, "This is a particular problem I can't handle. Will you handle it for me?" Now, what he did was turn to God, and he trusted God to do what for the selection procedure. If the man was someone I could trust, then keep him with me, and if he's someone that I can't trust, take him away from me. Now, does that solve a lot of problems when you're going to recruit an army from the no counts of the land? And also, did he assume the responsibility for him then? No, he didn't, because could he? This is an interesting thing. When you're submissive to somebody, always remember they never require you to be responsible for something that you can't do. Right now, he started to work. And he picked 3 men. And he picked the 3 men that he thought would be the best. Now, these 3 men, he spent hours with them. He spent hours with them until these 3 men were carbon copies of him. Now, you would think that if he had any fear at all, would he want to actually train 3 men as good as him? He doesn't have an army, mind you. He's in the caves. And he's training 3 men that are just as capable as he is. Now, it's interesting. Can you spend a lot of time in the caves with only 3 men? By the way, do you know that this is one of the most valuable periods of time that he spent in his entire life? Now, when he developed these 3 men each went out and secured 10 more. And what do you suppose these 3 men did with their 10? They spent hours and hours and hours. And by the way, why were they capable of training these 10 men to be carbon copies of them? What was the secret of their success? Because who had worked hours with them? King David. Right now, because he had done such a good job with them, were they able to bring the 10 men that each of them had up to the status of King David now? Now, I tell you, we're building a tremendous thing here, aren't we? Now we've got 34 people, do we not? We have King David in the position of the absolute ruler. We have 3 captains underneath him. And then we have 30 men underneath 3 captains. Now, after he organized these men, what do you suppose these men could do? Well, if you want to read this in the scriptures, it tells you that one man was walking along the road one day by himself, and he happened to meet 300 men of the enemy. Now, what would you do if you're walking along by yourself on a road and you meet 300 men of the enemy? Are these carbon copies? Well, so what are you going to expect now? He made a carbon copy that didn't believe in surrender. He made a carbon copy that was just like him, that when he's a little guy, he goes out and kills a giant. In other words, is this a carbon copy that he has? What would you expect now the carbon copy to do? Fight. And what do you suppose happened? 300 dead men. Are we talking about a great man? A warrior? By the way, this is more than King David killed. Did you know that? I am sure that you have heard it said that Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. But I got news for you tonight. David didn't kill the 10,000. His men did. Some men are just absolutely frightened to death if anyone in their organization begins to develop a little bit. They look over and they say, watching. There's our adversary. Firing. So they begin to build a case so they can get rid of him. What did King David do when he saw a man really developing? Well, I better spend more time with him to do what? Make him better so we can get a carbon copy here. Now, was David ever afraid that these 3 men would take over? No, because he had a role relationship. Now, you take a real dictator, can he have role relationship? Is Castro capable of role relationship? No. So will he work with 3 men to develop them to be superior to him? No, because if anyone starts to become just a little bit better, it's time to get rid of them. Are you beginning to see the difference now? When he develops these 30 men, and they're all carbon copies of him, what can these 30 men do? Is there a reason that he walked out of the caves and took over the country? Was it an accident, or was it something that was planned from the very beginning? Now, does anybody here tonight know the names of any of the 30 captains? Does anybody here know the names tonight of any of the 3 captains that were directly under King David? All right, is there anybody here tonight that has not heard of King David? Where's the glory? The glory is in being able to find a man who is even more skillful than you are, who actually knows certain facets of a business better than you do, and be able to work with him so much in a role relationship and make a carbon copy of him, the same as you, and then turn him loose. Now, did King David have to fear any time in his life that these men would take over his throne? Now, you suppose this makes it easy for him to be able to trust them completely with his life? In other words, when they're encamped in battle, and these 3 captains have got their tents close to his tent, how does he sleep? Like a baby. Because after all, it's going to take quite a few hundred men to get past these 3 men, isn't it? If he were Castro, and he were in his tent with these 3 men sleeping next to him, how would he sleep? We're saying then that in a role relationship, if you can develop the unity relationship, then the people underneath you are so much identical to you that they are you. Now, if you were back in those days and you belonged to the Philistines, who would you rather face, these 3 men or King David? Wouldn't matter. You're going to die anyway. Are you beginning to see what I mean? Are they all the same then? Now, can you go out tonight and find great people? Hey, let's take a young man that wants a wife. Can you go out and find a real good wife? No. Let's take a sales manager. Can you go out and find good salesmen? If you think you're going to go out and find them, you're going to suffer from delusion. There are not any around. If there were a good wife available, the only way that I can see you could possibly have one would be a widow. Because if she were good, who would she be true to? All right, if you had a good salesman and you had trained him and he was a carbon copy, could you go out and hire him? No, where's he going to be? In other words, why couldn't another king back in the days of King David have enlisted these three captains for their army? I mean, wouldn't they have been pretty good to have hired for your army? Could you have bought them? All right. Can you buy another man's salesman? Can you buy another man's employees? In other words, we're saying all the way through in the entire female role, can you find them in our society today? The answer is no. Then how do you actually arrive at an organization? You build it. And do you build it one person at a time? So what I would do tonight, if I were you, in a very practical approach to this, I would actually find one person in the world. And I would start working on one person, and I would develop that person into the exact image of myself. So they thought the way I thought, they believed the way I believed, their values were the way mine were, and I would train them so perfectly that you couldn't tell the difference between them or me. Now, if they are exactly like me, what will they do? Will they not select somebody else? And will they not work on them and train them? And how will they know how to train them? Because have they not been trained? And will they not set up exactly the role relationship with them? All right, now, can you stop this particular type of organization from growing? And will not each person then go out and select other people underneath them, and will they not train them until you are how many places now? The extent of your entire organization. When I'm going to have a carbon copy, it assumes a very important thing. It assumes that we had a King David to begin with. It assumes that we had a boss to begin with, doesn't it? It assumes that if you're going to have a perfect wife, you had what to begin with? A perfect husband. And I would think that there could be one step that you might take after hearing all the 30 hours before you actually go into unity relationships. And I heard this expressed very aptly one night in the seminar. A gentleman made this statement: I'm not so sure I want my wife to be a carbon copy of me. And he went further on to say, and I'm sure I don't want the children to be. All right, now, if you're not in a position tonight where you feel that you want carbon copies made of you, are you ready for unity? Now, I want you to realize tonight that if you're going to make carbon copies, you've got to have a good original. So what I would do, if you do not feel that you are ready for carbon copies, I would go back over the first 5 lessons. I would listen to them carefully and play them over and over and over until you begin to feel like that you're pretty pleased with the original. And then after you feel that you're satisfied with the original enough that you would like a carbon copy, then begin with lessons 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Because you'll find that in 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, you will actually learn all the principles necessary to begin to develop your carbon copies. Now, was God the Father satisfied with himself? Very much so. Then was he in a position to start a carbon copy? Was Christ very satisfied with himself? In other words, do they have any doubts or qualms about having something exactly like them? In fact, if you wanted to carry this a little further, is a man really capable of being a father until he's satisfied with his own original family? Should you actually go into marriage tonight as a man if you are not satisfied with the original? Because you go into an actual situation and you start making carbon copies of a letter that's full of mistakes, what have you got? Well, you make people that are full of mistakes, and after you finally have your wife just as bad as you are, she turns around and does what to the poor children? Makes them just as bad as you are, and you ruin yourself. So we say then the most important thing is just realize that you should play the female role until you learn from a male role. And I have seen this happen. So here's what I would suggest. If you have come to this point in the seminar and you don't feel that you're capable of making carbon copies identical to yourself, then what should you do? Play the female role to a person that you feel is an ideal male role. Now, what do you have to gain from this situation? I'm giving you a secret of fast growth. And what's the secret? Submit to a strong, powerful male role, and let that male role mold you into a carbon copy of himself. Now, this involves one thing. Some people believe that if they're not top dog, they're nothing. Now, let's go back to King David's 3 top men. Would you consider him nothing? Is there really a glory in finding a role relationship and playing the female role? Now, you'll find something else interesting too. That as you submit to this male role, will this allow the male role to become a bigger person? Will this allow the male role to become bigger, and would your position increase in importance? And this has been verified time and time again. I think too that if you cannot find a strong male role, the other solution would be to get some female roles underneath you and let them make you grow up. And this works very effectively. I can feel this so strong. If I were to give you the most powerful motivating force in my life, it would be the female roles under me. Because I've seen them come across the line through blue, giving everything they've got, and you know what I end up doing? Growing up overnight so fast, there's no comparison. But the point is, will there be any growth if it's not in a relationship either to a male role or a female role? And the answer is no. Will you grow in strictly competition? The motivating force for growth is not in competition. It has to be in a relationship, and it has to be in some type of a commitment to another person. Remember the illustration we used the other day about King David's 3 top men going through the enemy ranks to bring him water out of a well? Now, is that logical? The logical thing to do in time of warfare is what? If this is an enemy line, and this is an enemy line, and there's a well here in this country, and this is the line of fighting, and you are sitting here with your king, and he happens to make a passing remark, I'd like to have a glass of water. The logical thing to do would be, let's fortify this fortress right here, and let's advance, and let's drive them back beyond the point of the well. And then when we do this, we'll do what? Then we'll give you a drink of water. Now, what did they do? Well, they just went over there and got the water and come back that very night and gave it to him. He looked at it and he thought, you mean you risk your lives? Now, did he see that they were illogical? He really realized that his 3 men were crazy. Because look, to show you how ridiculous it is, if those men had been killed by going through the front line, would that have jeopardized the whole army? I mean, these are the top 3 captains of the entire army. You should do what? If anything, we should bring them way back here. Isn't this how we normally fight? And there's a reason why the generals are in the back. We don't have as many of them as we have of privates. Therefore, they're not as expendable. This is more than generals, by the way, when you're down to 3 top. This is a higher rank than what we have in our army as generals. And to run those men through these ranks for a glass of water, could King David drink it? He poured it on the ground. Why couldn't he drink it? Well, he says it's too valuable. Let me tell you the significance of it. Because they did that night when they should have been sleeping and getting their rest for the battle the next day, they were able to do what the next day in battle? In other words, what could you do if you knew your king thought so highly of you that he couldn't drink the water? He poured it out as a sacrifice to his God because it was too valuable for him to touch it. All right, now what would you do in the battle the next day if you knew you had a captain that thought that much of you? And by the way, what would King David do in the battle that next day when he knew he had 3 men that had that kind of feelings toward him? Would you develop unity in your lines of attack that the enemy couldn't match? Would it make up for the loss of sleep they had all night, going through the bushes and over the rivers and everything? Sometimes, to be successful, you have to be illogical. Do you see how the female role can make you grow up? I mean, when they go the extra mile and they do this and they do this and they turn around and give you glory and praise you and you didn't know you were that great and the next day you found out you really were and then you realize you got to work twice as hard tomorrow. And this is a cumulative thing too. I've had this happen in several relationships where I really tried to make good and then they got the idea that I was twice as good as what I was trying to make. And then I tried to make that, and before long I found that I was really reaching. The more I reach, what happens to the female role? They keep thinking you're greater than what you are, and you keep having to reach, and then you end up in a geometric progression of growth. And this involves quite a few pains in the male role. But I'll guarantee you that once you get caught in one of these geometric progressions, you'll never stop. Because the loyalty of the people underneath you is so precious that could you ever let go or let down? The real secret of success and the real secret of actually accomplishing a task that you set out to accomplish is in the one word, power. And when I talk about power tonight, let me define it. Power is being able to overcome every obstacle in your way and accomplish the goal. In other words, as long as you can accomplish the goal and no obstacle can stop you, then we say you have power. Now let's define horsepower. Horsepower in my car is the power that my car has to overcome friction. And as I overcome friction, we say I have so much actual power. Now, if I could eliminate the friction and I could step on the actual gas pedal in my car, where would I be in 1/1,000,000th of 1 second? Well, infinity. In other words, I would be gone. All right, now I'd like to actually show you how unity will give you infinite power. I realize on earth we always have friction, don't we? We always have resistance, and this is always the reason we can't accomplish something. Before I can get my car from point A to point B, which, by the way, assuming point B is my goal, or my goal-oriented behavior, do I have to overcome the friction on the road between the 2 points? Now, if I could eliminate the friction, could I reach point B immediately? All right, now, to actually have power, we want to be able to accomplish moving this object from point A to point B instantaneously. And the secret will be that I'm going to have an organization of people, and this organization of people are going to have a role relationship, and the role relationship will be molded into a unity relationship. And in this unity relationship, will I have any friction? No. Will I have any resistance? No. Will I wield and weld these people together until they are one, and until anyone in the group can be any other one in the group, and all in the group can perform all the functions in the group? And I've eliminated all of the problems of the hierarchy, the chain of command. I've eliminated all of the red tape, all of the problems of actually that society block us. Now, is there anything on earth that can be a match for this group? Now, how much power will they have amongst their members? All right, let's define it. It's the only place I know of in a physical world where I can say that you have infinite power, because will there be any resistance? We eliminate all resistance when we eliminate all rights. And when we've eliminated all of the rights and we have perfect submission, can we have friction? And if we have no friction, how much power do we have? Infinite power. All right, now, can you accomplish almost any task you set out to accomplish if you've got a group of people with infinite power? Now, let's go into power a little different way in defining it, besides actually using it in relationship to friction or resistance. Let's say that true power is love. Now, this is in contrast to our society, which says knowledge is power. We're saying then that true power is love, and we're going to use love a different way than we've used it so far in a seminar. We're going to say it is delegated love. We're saying then that the actual delegated authority that comes down the chain of command is love, and this particular authority, which is love, is power. Now, does this authority flow freely from the male role to the female role? Because there is absolutely no resistance. All right, now, go back to your actual source of power, and what is it? We're saying the whole thing is based on the principle of God being the head, right? All right, how much power do I have in the actual source of all power? Infinite. And if I have no resistance in each chain of command, how much power is flowing through this organization? Infinite power. All right, now, can you stop this particular organization? All right, now, you might say, here's 2 football teams. Or here's 2 countries that are of equal power. Could they use the same system, and would they be equals? And the answer is no, because the system in my delegated actual authority of power, do I only have one single chain of command? I'll illustrate. Here is a wife who is submissive to her husband. Is she in the chain of command directly under God? All right, is there actual power? All right, now she decides to commit adultery. If the woman commits adultery, we say then that she is not submissive to the chain of command where the power is. Therefore, is she cut off? So we're saying then that since we only have one chain of command, therefore we only have one way that love can come, only one way power can come, therefore can we have competition against this power? No, because there is only one. I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do some things. What I can do, that I ought to do, and what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I will do.